r/AskReddit by Reddit. What is your favorite? And that's why we had to put this sign up story. From my father. He was eating at a seafood restaurant and had to pee. There was a sign on the door to the bathroom that said something like, "If you ate this dish then wash your hands before using the bathroom." My father, being male and my father, laughed it off and stepped inside to use the urinal. There was a moment when he was peeing and fine, and then there became the moment when he felt like his junk was on fire. So he ran to the sinks and started splashing water on his junk, which also splashed his face, so he, in a very Home Alone style, grabbed his face in an OMG fashion, which then started to burn his eyes. So he was there for a very long time splashing water up and down trying to control the burn. Eventually he returned to the table, paid, and left. Obviously there was a reason why the sign existed, and he was just an extension of it. Through my cousin who managed a restaurant for years. On the hostess stand at the front they had a sign that said, "We smoke our meats with premium apple wood." A small bowl of the wood chips they used placed right in front of it. The amount of people who would take a wood chip and try to eat it was staggering. It got to the point they had to keep a bag of the wood chips in the cabinet of the hostess stand. People would sometimes put them in their mouth and spit it out embarrassed and try to cover it up. Some would laugh and say, "I shouldn't have had that last drink." Others would turn around, double down, and try to give the saliva covered chip to the hostess, then complain that these mints are disgusting. So there is now another sign beside the bowl that says, "Wood chips do not eat," in red letters. Makes for fun conversation every night for the hostesses seating people who are new to the restaurant. Unfortunately they still need to keep an extra bag of wood chips in the stand, and people still think they look like a great after dinner snack. Now when the double downers complain, the hostess just points to the sign and laughs. People never cease to amaze. My husband and I moved into our first home. It was a completely renovated, amazingly cool house. We knew the previous owner flipped it, and it was a bona fide bachelor pad, leather bar, pinball machine, blow under lighting in the kitchen/bathroom, hot tub, the whole 9 yards. A few weeks after moving and we noticed people kept stopping by the house asking for Alex. We told them he didn't live here anymore, and they always would ask if we had his new address. They were nice enough, but it was starting to get annoying. One Tuesday evening around 11 o'clock we were falling asleep on the couch, and all of a sudden some guy strung out appeared in our living room. He opened the sliding door right next to us and walked in asking for Alex. My husband stood up and was like, "WTF, Alex doesn't live here anymore, tell all your friends," and the guy left. We learned the next day from our neighbors that Alex was the local drug kingpin in the area and frequently had his unsavory clientele over to pick up product here at all hours of the day/night. That weekend we put up a sign that said, "Alex doesn't live here," went out and got a massive Rottweiler. We named him Alex. Well, where the duck did your dog live? Alex didn't live in that house. He got his own dog house all to his own. We had to place a "no hanging around outside" sign up because the teenagers did not know what no loitering meant. I work in private security. I once upon a time had to ask a group of people hanging out in a hospital parking garage to leave. They asked why. I said we had a policy of no loitering in the garage due to some issues we had been having with break-ins. Their response was, "We ain't loitering, we just waiting around." I had a friend in high school who thought loitering was just another word for littering, which sort of makes sense if you know the area. There's a very specific accent to the area that I can't really explain. The word high tide is a good example though. It's pronounced hoy-tide. Like the center sound is a British pay attention OI instead of a hard I. So litter to loiter isn't as big a stretch as you'd think. He'd lived there all his life and I was from off, so I got to explain the difference. Weird day. Oh, I love. Pick that can up. Destroyed as a no loitering area. 3 times over the winter, I took my kid to the zoo and there was a volunteer standing at a certain spot of the gorilla enclosure, showing one of the gorilla's videos on her phone. He was very interested in videos of other gorillas, and it was mental stimulation for him, she would tell us. The gorilla would sit very close to the glass to see her phone. She was dressed just like a volunteer and talked like one too. Turns out she wasn't a volunteer. Turns out watching YouTube is bad for gorillas. There is now a sign saying, "Don't show videos to the gorillas. It has a negative impact on their relationship with their family." My favorite mostly because it happened to me, but not because it was a great experience lol. When I was about 6, we lived across the street from a park and my sister and I would go play over there all the time, of course. On this particular summer day, we had our best friends over, who also happened to be sisters. My best friend and I decide to go back across the street to get some popsicles, and my mother is across the street to supervise the crossing. This was a useless effort, because I had stepped between the cars parked on my side of the street to check if the coast was clear. I was too short to see over them, and I got hit by a car. I was in the hospital for a month, because my skull was cracked, for the second time in my life lol. Anyway, after that, they put up a sign that said "Slow children at play." We moved shortly after all this, but it's still there, and whenever I pass it, I'm reminded that it's there because of me. If only you hadn't been such a slow child. Edit. Really? You'd gild this? Not a sign, but I was going through a military school in Alabama when a classmate asked for a ride to a local bar so she could line dance. It was her preferred exercise, and she was jonesing. So I took her, being the only person available with a POV, privately owned vehicle. She danced for a couple of hours, teach a new line dance night, on a Wednesday. As I recall, then I said it was time to go back to our lodging, because I was tired. I added that I would be leaving town that weekend, but I'd noticed a mechanical bull in the corner. It was just sitting there that night, but I bet they had it going on the weekend, and all she had to do was tell the fighter pilots in the room about the mechanical bull and she would have a ride to the bar to line dance to her heart's content that weekend. She agreed it was a good idea. I came back Monday morning and was met by a couple of greetings that went something like, "Did you hear about James?" I said no, and they said they had to hurry, but we could talk later. I caught the third person who said that and asked what, specifically, had happened. She began with, "Well see, Amy suggested this great bar across town, where there was a mechanical bull. Turns out, James had ridden well and long, being fairly athletic, and having not had much to drink, and they had cranked up the volume, if you follow. He'd been doing great until his right foot had become wedged between the pedestal and the saddle at precisely the moment he had pitched his body left to counterbalance the buck of the saddle, and, snap snap. The x-ray showed that he'd snapped both lower leg bones, and the fibula was aligned with the tibia, while the lower tibia was tenting his skin. He ended up on a morphine drip for a while, along with some bolts and stuff in his leg. Anyway, in a roundabout way, thanks to me, the Air Force now includes mechanical bull on their list of risky/dangerous activities. On holiday in Tenerife, my dad took me to a park thing where you could feed these little spider monkeys. Well, this monkey was chilling on my dad's shoulder and suddenly I hear him yell, and the monkey just goes flying up to the top of a tree. Well, it turned out my dad had a mole on his neck, like quite a big raised one, and this monkey had bitten it clean off. Like it was sat in the top of its tree just chewing it like gum. Went back the next year, and they had a badly hand-drawn sign of man with a big mole on his neck saying danger or something like that. They remembered my dad from the year before, and made him take photos with the sign and everything. My dad's mole is a reason they had to put up that sign. So my family goes camping for 2 weeks every year. One year when I was young there was a sign that said all dogs must have leashes, and it had an image of a dog on a leash, with no one holding the leash. Keep this in mind. We are setting up camp and the forest ranger stops by and our dogs are walking around freely, not causing any issues, just sniffing around as dogs do. The ranger goes up to my mom and says, "Your dogs need to be on leashes." To which my mom points out they are wearing leashes. She calls them over, and the leashes are hooked on but no one is holding them. The ranger is dumbfounded, and says, "I think you're supposed to be holding it." She plays dumb, and says, "Oh well, the sign didn't say or show that." My mother is a college educated woman. She isn't dumb by any means. She knew what she was doing, and did it anyways, because it was funny. The ranger leaves, and we don't hear anything else. Fast forward to the next year. The sign was updated, and had someone holding the leash of the dog this time. I was a contractor for a manufacturing plant featuring a dozen high-speed robots, overhead cranes moving thousands of pounds of materials, and an oven constantly cranking out 1000-degree heat. After a couple months without a visit, I noticed that the usual safety gear must be worn beyond this point. Signs on every entry to the plant had vanished, and 3 signs had replaced it. All required safety gear must be worn beyond this point. Employees only, and the strange one: no children under 16 permitted. Seems one of the owner's children, a boy of about 9, had wandered out onto the plant and gotten hurt. It wasn't anything bad, he just fell and bumped his head, but it was bad enough to require a doctor visit. The doctor informed the health insurance company where it happened, who called their commercial liability insurer, who flipped the duck out that there was an unsupervised child in a dangerous area. There was some kerfuffle about the kid technically owning 10% of the company through a trust and was being allowed there, but in the end signs went up. Same place also had a sign showing a robot arm waving a dismembered human hand, complete with Photoshop red blood splatter, and the words "I do not shake hands" in English, German, and Japanese. One of the operators had knocked it up after 2 individuals on a plant tour moved a safety chain and then tried very hard to shake hands with an idle FANUC arm, forcing him to recalibrate it. Thank you for watching Reddit. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more r/AskReddit videos. Share your stories in the comment section below.